And now I'm opening for questions. And, okay, Margie. She wants to know if it's HBO, if I'll be one of the writers. My primary job at the HBO thing is to cash the checks. So, no, that's highly unlikely. They don't really want to know from the novelist. They just want to, give you your money and send you on your way. So it's doubtful. That's what my agent tells me. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll see.
So there's a quote by Dorothy Parker, which I'm sure you know, because you know all about Dorothy Parker, saying, I hate writing, I love having written.
Right.
So
You want to know if I feel that way?
Yes.
I don't know if you could hear, but Debbie Honoroff asked, she quoted, there's a famous Dorothy Parker quote where she had actually said, all writers hate writing but love having written, and do I agree with that? I actually don't. I mean, I understand what she's saying. There is a lot of frustration and despair involved in the project, but I love when I get into the zone. The concentration is so intense, and the whole world just sort of stops existing when you're really in that zone. And if I hate it, I don't think I could do it, because it's a lot of work. But no, so I don't agree with that. So I love Dorothy Parker, but I don't agree with that one thing. Alexandra?
On an average amount of time, how long does it take from start to just think about an idea of one book?
Say that again. How long does it take to think about an idea?
Yeah, just to think about an idea, not even writing it, just thinking.
Yeah, well, no, that's a really good question, and it varies a lot from book to book. With The Other Life, which had like 40 different titles before it actually was written or came out, I probably thought about that for a whole year before I started writing it. I mean, it sort of came to me when I was working on the previous book, and I just kept thinking and thinking and thinking, and the kids will probably tell you I talked to them about it in the car, and I had this idea and that idea, and so for that book, it was I probably thought about it for a year and then actually took a whole year to write it.
Hi.
Hi.
When you write, do you write from beginning to end, or do you write the beginning, the end, the middle, or
Right.
How do you
Right. The
write?
question was, do I write the whole book in the order that it happens, or do I sort of skip around from chapter to chapter? I know a lot of writers that skip around. They say, oh, I got an idea. I wrote the last scene, and I wrote the first scene, and I wrote the middle scene. I cannot work that way. I have to write in the order. It's not necessarily chronological order, because sometimes there are flashbacks, but I have to write in the order that it's going to appear in the book, because for me, everything is sort of dependent on everything else. And if I skip ahead and write a scene later, I feel for me that I'm going to wind up writing for that scene, which might not be the right scene. There has to be, for me, an organic part of the process. I do write a loose outline before I start, but I think, as most writers know, you can outline as much as you want, but sometimes you get to a scene and you had all good intentions, and you get there and the character is not going to do what you thought they were going to do, and you cannot force that. And that could change scene 17 or scene 36. So for me, anyway, that doesn't work. I have to actually write in order. But it's different for different writers. I don't think there's a right and wrong. I think different things work for different people. Carolyn?
If HBO does come to fruition, who do you see playing characters?
Oh, that's a good question. Who do I see playing the characters? I think, I fantasized for a long time because I was thinking a lot in terms of movies. This actress, that actress, and what I was doing was pairing a lot of mothers and daughters, because there's a lot of Quinn and her mother. So I was trying to find actresses that sort of looked like, they could go together, and I was taking popular actresses, like who could be Sandra Bullock's mother, maybe it could be Cher, and who could be Jennifer Aniston's mother, and maybe Meryl Streep or whatever. But I think, with HBO, they try to find new faces. I don't think they generally, pay the money to get established Hollywood people. They usually make stars. So I think, if it happens, I don't think it's going to be, it probably isn't going to be, somebody that we already know. I don't know. Hopefully somebody that we will know.
Your book's premise is sounds familiar to string theory and quantum physics. How much of that was did you use, and did you actually study those things?
Oh yes, the quantum physics question. All right, to be honest, I'm kind of an idiot about quantum physics. But, and I didn't know about that theory when I wrote the book. I heard about it afterwards. In fact, I saw this special on TV about who is that physicist who had the many worlds theory. Mike, what was his name?
Heisenberg.
Come on. No, not Heisenberg. It was somebody else.
Well, 2 people said
Was
that.
it Heisenberg? Yeah, it'll come to me at 3 o'clock, and I'll call all of you. No, you know, I heard about it afterwards, that there's actually in quantum physics this theory that everything that could happen to an atom has to be happening simultaneously because it can't not happen. So every possibility actually really does occur. I mean, wrap your mind around that, which was a little hard for me. I don't know. I have a friend, I don't know if he's here tonight, who's a theoretical mathematician, and he sort of really, really patiently tried to explain quantum physics to me, and, you know, the multiple worlds theory, and, you know, we were trick-or-treating with the children and tagging along, and you know, my head was going to explode. But no, I was not influenced by it because I actually heard about that after. But you know, I mean, it's fascinating, it's interesting. But boy, that's a really big concept. And they even some physicists even came up with that Schrodinger's cat. Do you know? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Schrodinger's cat, which is just this sort of strange model to explore the possibility kind of can't be dead and alive at the same time. So yeah, big stuff. Okay, yes.
When you created the portal, I got to imagine there could have been a zillion ways that you could have created her going through this crack. How did you come up with a very simple crack versus some other way of doing it?
Right. Yeah, the question was, how did I decide exactly how to do the portal, that I did it, you know, in a crack? You know, that's kind of a funny thing. I knew when I came up with the concept of the book, if I could create the framework of the reality within the story, I could write it. I mean, and that was tricky. And that was sort of experimental. I just started writing. I said to myself, I got to see if I can make this work. If I can't make it work, forget it. Just forget the whole idea. I liked the idea of there being a portal in her basement. I liked it being in the foundation of her home. I liked the imagery of that, you know, the foundation. I wanted to do it in a very, the most domestic setting, so I put it behind like a built-in ironing board. I like the idea that that almost came to me in a vision, and I just saw this woman sort of ironing. I just had this almost ethereal image of a woman ironing, and they're sort of slipping through this crack in the wall to another life, just leaving and walking away. But I sort of refined it and played with it, but that was how it came to me. Yes, and Cookie, yes, that's my aunt.
Are you working on another book right now?
Yes, I'm working on another book right now that I'm also pretty excited about. This one is called Farewell, Dorothy Parker. And the way I got the idea for that one, you know, I was looking at current books, and I was really marveling at the fact that there are so many books about Jane Austen. You know, it's almost like you know, like a genre. You know, there's not just like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. There's a Jane Austen book club, and you know, according to Jane, there's just, you know, dozens of books. And you know, and I love Jane Austen, but I was just thinking about that, and I thought to myself, wow, you know, there's a lot of Jane Austen fans out there. Somebody should do that with Dorothy Parker. And I went, oh, me, because I've been a Dorothy Parker fan, you know, my whole life, and it just seemed kind of like incredible hubris. I'm like, am I going to be able to write Dorothy Parker as a character? And I just said, well, just, you know, no guts, no glory. Give it a shot. See if you can work it out. And I'm actually done with the quote unquote first draft, which is, for me is like the 50th draft. But when I say that, I mean it's the first full pass that my editor is looking at. So I'm waiting to hear from her, and you know, then she gives me her notes, and I rewrite it, and hopefully in 2012 sometime that book will be out.
Did your husband ask you if there was another man that you...
No, I think he knows better than to ask. He's in the back laughing. No, but here's my great story about my husband and my writing, because, you know, my first book, I didn't show him, you know, I wanted to wait till I was almost done. And the first book is really raunchy. You know, and which I think was probably partly because I was writing in a vacuum. I didn't even know if I was ever going to get published. So I was just having fun with it. I was just going crazy. And like I said, made it really raunchy. And my husband was reading it like this. Honey? He just couldn't believe the things that were going through my head. Yes.
I might have missed it, but what's interesting is this portal concept.
Yes.
Does your book's portal go only back in time, or does it also go forward?
Okay, good question, and it's actually, there's no time travel. Because what it is my character on the other side of the portal is the life she would have lived running simultaneously if she had stayed with her ex-boyfriend and hadn't gotten married, if she had made the other choice. So it is as if she had been in that other life all along and in this other life simultaneously and could cross between these two possibilities. So it's really not a time travel book. Stephen.
Right, but so here's the question. She spends time
Yes.
in one world,
Yes.
but things are transpiring in the other world while she's in the other world, and vice versa, right? So how does she assimilate the memories necessary to continue to exist in each world as she moves back and forth and is absent from events?
Leave it to my brother to ask the most esoteric question possible. But you know, you could tell that he grew up reading science fiction. He wants the whole science fiction lowdown. It's magic, Stephen. It's magic. When she goes into the other life, she automatically has the memories of both lives.
And that
Ta-da!
was the answer she gave me my whole life.
That's right. That's right. A follow-up question.
Follow-up question. When you hand your manuscripts over to an editor, are you afraid you're going to lose your voice?
No, not at all. The question was, when you hand your manuscripts over to an editor, are you afraid you're going to lose your voice? No. A professional editor will absolutely never do that to an author. They respect you. They understand that your voice is really important. I've never really even had an editor make a suggested change. And let me explain what I mean by that. And what an editor does, and I'm not talking about a copy editor, the person that goes through and, in my case, adds a lot of commas, and make sure everything is consistent. But what an editor does, what a good editor does, and I've been very fortunate that I've had good editors, they identify the problems, and they don't usually suggest fixes unless you really specifically say, gee, I can't figure out how to fix that. But what they do is they'll identify problems and leave it to you, the author, to fix, which is really the way it should be, because I think if you're not the writer and really that deep into the book, any suggested fix, it's usually there's a reason why you didn't use that solution to begin with. So, so a good editor, no, they don't tinker with your voice. They don't mess with your voice. They might say, gee, in chapter 5 you lost your voice for a little while there, but they'll never go in and really tinker with your language. They do respect the author's voice, so that's a good thing. Is that Annette? Yeah. Hi.
What is your feeling on technology, young readers, young writers, and the role that visual stimulation plays in imagination? You say that you think of things and thoughts come to you. And I wonder if younger Americans will have that same imagination.
Right, do I think that...
Electronic reading and just visual stimulation. What do you think?
I don't know. I think the human mind is... She wanted to know if all the electronics that kids do, if that's going to impact their imagination. I certainly hope not, and I don't think so. I think the human mind is such an elastic thing, and I think I've seen a lot of imagination from kids. Are there any teachers here? Do you see imagination from kids? I mean, do you feel like that their creativity is just as vibrant as it was in our day? So the teachers say yes, which is good. I'm glad to hear that, because that's what I would think, and that's what I would hope. It's a good question. Sammy? What was the question?
Do you get to design your own cover?
Oh, he wants to know if I get to design my own cover. Oh, Sam, thank you so much. I'm really glad you asked about the cover. I love my cover. I'm really, really excited about it. That's really something for an author to say. Now, understand, an editor wants you to be happy with your cover. Contractually, I mean, maybe some big authors, maybe Stephen King contractually can, tell them to nix a cover. But really all it says is that, they have to show it to you and consider your input. But I know authors who have actually had books with covers that they hated. So we went through a lot with the cover to this book because it's a really tricky book to figure out what kind of image to assign to. And the first cover I loved, and it was very simple. It was just looked like water with some little sudsy bubbles and a wedding ring in the middle. And I thought that was kind of cool. And I loved it. My editor loved it. My agent loved it. And the sales department said, no, we cannot sell this book with this cover. That's just not going to work. And you have to listen because those are the folks that are on the front line selling it to bookstores. And if they feel that they're going to come to Book Review or the big chain stores and have the buyer saying, oh, that doesn't look like it's... So, okay. Then they came back to me with a cover that I hated so much. I started to cry when they sent it over. And I called my agent, I was like, please, we can't do this cover. So I was totally traumatized. My editor was shocked because she loved it. My agents weren't crazy about it, but nobody hated it as much as I did. I thought it was depressing. I thought it misrepresented the book. I just thought everything was wrong about it. So fortunately, I made my case strongly enough. And they went, and they actually, instead of using an in-house designer, they wound up at that point, I think they were feeling desperate enough to spend the money on going to an outside designer. And I think the outside designer found this photograph, which is actually some sort of process where they, superimpose two photographs. And I saw this and I went, that's it, I love it. It's just, I love the light and dark. I think that it gets across a few different emotions. There's like not lots of conflict there. I think it's got hope and it's got mystery, and I don't know, I just really, really like it. So, other questions? I think we could take a couple more.
How much self-marketing will you be doing on this book?
How much self-marketing will I be doing on this book? I work like an animal trying to market the book. I do have a marketing background, so I'm not a stranger to it, and I've really learned over the past several years the online world and really kind of become a self-expert in social media and blogging, and so I work constantly. I mean, right now I'm not even working on a book, which is strange for me, but I'm working really hard. People send me blog interviews, and I just do all this social media stuff. So yeah, I do a lot of marketing work myself.
Some authors say that the character takes over the voice of the book when they're writing. In other words, the character becomes the writer of the book.
Right.
Do you have that experience, or
Sure.
are you dictating the character?
Right.
Or is the character dictating the book?
She wants to know, does the character wind up taking over the book? In a sense they do, because once you've established the character, you've got to listen to them. And like I was starting to say before, sometimes you get to a scene and you had in the outline and you just assume they were going to do it, and you go to write the scene and the character is just not going to behave in the way that you wanted them to. And if you try to force that, it's going to be obvious to the reader. So you have to respect that. You've created this character, they do come to life. They do have certain personality traits, and there are things that they will say and won't say, and the things that they will do and won't do. And I think as a writer, you have to respect that. And that is really part of the organic process of being a writer. And really one of the joys for me of being a writer is when the character comes alive to that extent that they know what they're going to do. I love that.
Did you always know you wanted to be an author?
Did I always know I wanted to be an author? Yes, I think from a very, very young age I knew I wanted to be an author. I mean, I graduated high school knowing I wanted to be an author. I graduated college knowing I wanted to be an author. But I was better at procrastinating than I was at writing for a very long time.
What about when you were little, when you were like in elementary school?
When I was in elementary school, I don't think that I had the self-esteem. I think I loved to write. But I think that I thought writing was for people who were smarter than I was. I just don't think that I had the self-confidence to even go there. And it wasn't until something happened where a teacher, sort of gave me a little praise on a paper and said that this was good writing. I went, oh, it is. I can do this. And the light sort of went on for me. But then after I got out of college, I wound up being a professional writer in marketing. I was an advertising copywriter. So I was able to tell myself I was a writer and kept putting off my novel writing dream for a couple of decades. So, Joanne?
How do you get your characters' names?
How do I get my characters' names? All different ways. Sometimes they just occur really naturally, and the first name I think of is the right name, and other times I really struggle. I did find a website, sort of this cool website, that gives the most 100 popular name for every year going back like a couple hundred years. So if you have a character and you want the character to be born in 1897 or 1951, or you could see what names were popular then. And so that's kind of helpful if you're writing a period piece. But it can be more critical than you realize. When I was first thinking about The Other Life, I had a different name for the main character, and I was having a lot of trouble getting the character to gel for me. She just wasn't coming together. And then I woke up one day and I went, oh, because that's not her name. And the name Quinn popped into my head, which is a very unusual name, especially for women. It's more usually, but her mother was an artist, and I thought she would give her an unusual name. And as soon as that name came to me, I said, I got her. I got her. I nailed it. All of a sudden, she was alive. The name can be really, really important. And like I said, I get them from all different places. But for me, what's also, because there's part of my brain that's very, very commercial, having that marketing background. And I really like to take good care of my readers. So I'm very cautious about not having any similar sounding names. I try not to use the same first letter, because I know sometimes when I read books, I get lost. I'm midway through and I'll go, wait, who is that again? So I like to make it a little bit easier for my readers and give the characters all very, very distinct names. It's just something I do. And that can really, push certain names that I want to use away. And so sometimes you really have to play with it and change it. Richard?
The names aren't available in the Costco for authors?
There must be a special section, you buy them by the crate. It's over by the kayaks. And yeah. Other questions? Yes?
Hi. Do you have any half books laying around?
Any what books?
Half books, unfinished.
Oh, unfinished books lying around. Not really. Before I wrote Farewell, Dorothy Parker, I was really trying hard to write another book. So when I got and I was having trouble with it. I kept sending chapters to my agent, and they were like, "We love it, but you're not nailing the story." So I put that aside when I got the Dorothy Parker idea, and that was kind of funny because I actually said to them, I need some FaceTime with you, and they thought I was coming in to talk to them about the book that I was struggling with, and I said, I got another idea to pitch, and I talked them the Dorothy Parker idea. So that book is on the back burner, but I don't consider it abandoned. I'm going back to it, but it's going to have new life, and I'm going to reinvent that one. I'm kind of excited. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I'm going to write it. I think we probably want to start doing the signing. So let me take one more question. Michael.
I'm curious, when you write, how much of what you write about, or the people you write about, do you draw from your own life and your own experience versus what you just make up, or what you kind of wish was your own alternate reality?
Yeah, I don't take people wholesale out of my life and put them in a book and say, I'm going to write a Michael Samus character into this book. But I might take a guy and say I'm going to give him, maybe a little bit of your career and a little bit of, Ethan's personality, so I might sort of take little bits and pieces from people and sort of put them together and form a whole person. And of course, I do draw on my life. I draw on my own experiences. But what I try to do is find the emotional truths in my life and then use fictional scenarios to get across those emotional truths. And that's it. Thank you.